Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Levy. It's my distinct privilege to serve as the 10th chair of the board of the Legal Services Corporation, and so wonderful to be here with you in Colorado. On behalf of our outstanding LSC board, most of whom are here with us today, including Colorado and Denver's own remarkable Julie Riskin, who is the co-executive director of Colorado's Cross Disability Coalition. Julie's right there. I welcome you. I welcome you to this special forum on increasing access to justice. We at LSC extend our heartiest congratulations to Colorado Legal Services on the momentous occasion of your 100th anniversary. And LSC is honored to be jointly hosting this event with Colorado Legal Services and the Legal Aid Foundation of Colorado. They're both doing, as you know, fantastic work here in this magnificent state, and we're all looking forward to learning more about that work today. We'll be privileged to hear a fireside chat between the outstanding former director of Colorado Legal Services, John Asher, and his terrific successor, Matt Baca. Our program will also feature a video from Nicole Ponzer, a client board member of Colorado Legal Services. We look forward to hearing her story. And finally, we'll have an illuminating panel regarding the rural justice gap. The panel will be moderated by LSC's stellar president, Ron Flagg, and features some experts in the field who are working hard here in Colorado to expand access to justice. Well, Colorado Legal Services' 100th anniversary comes this year, just the year after LSC's 50th anniversary. Being such a long-running, successful legal aid organization, what you have here in Colorado has been a shining example to other legal aid organizations all across our country and a beacon of hope for tens of thousands of people who benefit from your work every year. It was almost 15 years ago that our board last convened here in Denver, and at that time, John Walsh, Colorado's longest-serving U.S. attorney, made the compelling observation, and I quote him, that just as no person should be above the law, no person should be below it. This idea that no American is below the law is a core promise of our nation. At the heart of LSC's mission, established on July 25, 1974, when Richard Nixon signed the LSC Act to, quote, help provide equal access to the system of justice in our nation and to provide high-quality legal assistance to those who would otherwise be unable to afford legal counsel. Of the corporation the LSC Act created, Nixon said, here each day, the old, the unemployed, the underprivileged, and the largely forgotten people of our nation may seek help. Well, over 50 years later, they are still seeking that help. And here in Colorado and across the nation every day, in fact, during these past 5 decades, our extraordinary network of providers has helped 75 million low-income Americans with their civil legal problems. And over these 100 years, Colorado Legal Services has assisted over 1 million low-income Coloradans. Think about that. Well, as you likely know, LSC is the nation's largest funder of civil legal aid, supporting 100 civil legal aid providers with over 900 offices in every county of every state, as well as the District of Columbia and the U.S. territories. These grantees provide high-quality legal services for more than 5 million low-income Americans annually, including more than 1 million children, over 200,000 survivors of domestic violence, and nearly 45,000 veterans. Currently, 16% of Americans qualify for LSC-funded assistance because their household income is at or below 125% of the federal poverty guideline. Unfortunately, as you may know, and LSC's recent Justice Gap report revealed, low-income Americans do not receive any or enough legal help for 92% of their substantial civil legal problems. And when you consider that that report also found that 74% of low-income households experience at least one civil legal problem a year, and 39%, whether 5 or more, well, you can see the magnitude of the challenge that lies before us. The year before he became Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States in 2017, Colorado's own Neil Gorsuch wrote in a compelling article for Judicature magazine on affordable access to justice, and I quote the justice, "Most everyone agrees that in the American civil justice system, many important legal rights go unvindicated. Serious losses remain uncompensated, and those called on to defend their conduct are often forced to spend altogether too much." Well, the chronic underfunding of LSC has helped to fuel this crisis in civil justice. Many of our grantees are forced to turn away half of the eligible applicants who seek their assistance because of a lack of resources. We were encouraged to hear of the creation of Colorado's Equal Justice Fund, signed into law by Governor Polis in June of last year. And this new fund is estimated to provide $2 million a year for legal assistance for Colorado's low-income population. Well, in addition to seeking more funding, LSC and its grantees have been working to develop other creative approaches to help narrow the justice gap. For the past 25 years, LSC has convened the only national conference focused exclusively on the use of technology to address the civil legal needs of low-income Americans. More than 700 people attended the conference earlier this year, and at that conference I saw firsthand the leadership of our grantees in the developing of uses of AI. Well, you can still register for next year's Innovations in Technology Conference. It's in San Antonio at the end of January. And of course, LSC's Technology Initiative Grants Program has played a major direct role in developing legal tech innovations since it was founded in 2000. Since its creation, the TIG program has awarded grants supporting technology initiatives to 924 projects across our country. In just the past 5 years, Colorado Legal Services has received 3 such awards to support their technology projects, including creation of comprehensive self-help website for increased cybersecurity and tech systems optimization, and for developing a system to collect client outcome data through text messaging, increasing the role of private lawyers in civil legal aid can also help to narrow the justice gap. You'll hear more about that significant effort here in Colorado at our reception following this forum. LSC's grantees are also collaborating with and learning from the medical community. 90 of our grantees across the country, including here in Colorado, now participate in some form of medical legal partnership, nearly 2/3 of the programs we fund. And finally, LSC convenes task forces to address and provide best practices for handling major issues affecting access to justice across the country. At the end of this month, our Rural Justice Task Force will release its final report and findings and recommendations to help our largely rural programs. The report is the result of input and expertise of people in rural areas all around the country, including Colorado. But of course, all of this good work requires financial investment. 30 years ago, Congress appropriated $400 million, 30 years ago, for LSC. Currently, our funding is at the level of $560 million. Much, much more is needed to close this significant justice gap after so many years of underfunding. In fact, our bipartisan LSC board voted unanimously to request from Congress $2.1 billion for LSC's fiscal year 2026 budget. But that's why it's particularly distressing to me, to our board and our grantees, that the House of Representatives voted to cut LSC by 46%, returning LSC's budget to a 1999 level and resulting in 3 million fewer Americans annually receiving legal assistance. But we're still hopeful because for their part, the Senate actually voted to slightly increase LSC's appropriation by $6 million for 2026. Well, as a recently released LSC analysis regarding the economic impact of civil legal services on the country, around the country, and you've got your own here, powerfully demonstrates, on average, civil legal services return to local economies $7 for every dollar invested in civil legal aid. Well, in case you haven't heard, we're in a shutdown. And you may also wonder, but I'm happy to assure you, our grantees are funded through the end of this year. Well, time will tell what resolution Congress will come to. But in the meantime, I'm hopeful that LSC's long history of bipartisan support, the incredibly valuable, irreplaceable work our grantees do, will not be forgotten. And we once again strongly implore Congress to increase the funding of LSC and its grantees. On the occasion of Colorado Legal Services' 100th anniversary, just following LSC's 50th, we now look to another milestone, our nation's 250th anniversary. And as we prepare for that next year, I just can't help but reflect on the belief of our country's founders that they held so strongly that ensuring access to justice was the foundation of a just society. Thomas Jefferson called it the most sacred of duties of government. George Washington believed it to be the firmest pillar of good government. James Madison called it the end of civil society. And as your own Chief Justice, Monica Marquez, compellingly put it recently in a letter to Congress supporting LSC's funding, the promise of justice must be real to all who seek it. Justice for only those who can afford it is neither justice for all nor justice at all. Well, you'll have to forgive me. You have to forgive me a personal reflection, because as we recognize anniversaries, 50 years ago, my father, Edward Levy, was sworn in as our nation's 71st Attorney General. My dad loved Colorado, and he brought us here many summers, even taught a class at the University of Colorado Law School during the summer of 1958. We lived at the top of Baseline Road in Boulder, and then at that time, this 10-year-old city kid reluctantly learned how to cross a stream in sneakers. And Dad was even an early trustee of the Aspen Institute. So I can't come to Colorado in this community without thinking of him. And as he concluded his service to our country as Attorney General, in his farewell address to the Department of Justice, he stirringly, in my view, observed that the values upon which our system of justice are founded can never be won for all time. They must always be won anew. Well, these past 51 years and 100 here in Colorado, LSC and its 130 grantees, they're doing their very best to try to win anew our nation's foundational promise of liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, and thank you for all you're doing to help support equal access to justice here in Colorado and across our country. It's now my great privilege to introduce the fireside chat between John Asher and Matt Baca. I can't let this occasion pass without noting that John Asher and I grew up around the corner from one another in Chicago. Isn't that incredible? Our families were friends, and who could have known that at this moment our lives would lead us down these intertwined paths. It's been such a profound pleasure to know and admire John all these years and witness his incredible leadership. And we have Jacqueline Allen, wonderful broadcast journalist here from ABC Denver, to moderate their conversation. Thank you for being here today, Jacqueline, and for bringing awareness to Colorado's access to justice work through your news coverage. And I gather we first have a video.
Denver 7 Investigates is uncovering the stories of Colorado's ghosts. They were born here in Colorado, but on paper, they don't exist. Thank you for staying with us here on Denver 7 News at 5. I'm Jessica Porter.
And I'm Natalie Chuck. Our consumer investigator, Jacqueline Allen, joins us now live in studio. And Jacqueline, you spoke with people who say that Colorado's unusually strict birth certificate laws and rules really shut them out of a normal life.
That's right, Natalie and Jessica. I heard from one woman who says because Colorado's refusal to give her a birth certificate, she feels invisible. No driver's license, health insurance, or proof she is who she says she is. Now, as unbelievable as that sounds, our investigation found she's not alone.
It's like I exist, but I don't exist.
To her family, it's obvious Abigail Colon is real.
Yeah.
Born in Woodland Park, Colorado, using a midwife, her birth written in the family Bible, one of the few records of who she is and where she came into this world.
Why don't you have a birth certificate?
So my father, from a young age, because his parents are from Cuba, so never trusted any form of government at all. And so he thought it would be in our best interest that we stay anonymous.
Homeschooled and without an ID, health insurance, or even the ability to get legally married. Her husband, Ethan McKinnon, was determined to get a delayed birth certificate from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, CDPHE.
It's dumbfounding. No one was answering me. No one would reach back out to me.
Their growing family gave them a growing sense of urgency, so they turned to Colorado Legal Services and supervising attorney Casey Sherman.
Abigail's been trying to resolve this since she was 16 years old. She's just been getting requests for additional evidence until we stepped in.
Court records show the evidence included everything from affidavits to a report from Child Protective Services when Abigail was 11.
The submitted documentation was insufficient.
Still, CDPHE denied the birth certificate. The reason? No records before Abigail turned 10.
There's a record when she was 11 years old. That won't work?
It will not. She has to have a record before her 10th birthday, according to CDPHE's regulations.
How would you characterize Colorado's law?
Colorado has the strictest delayed birth certificate law in the country, without question.
All three of Abigail's brothers, they've been able to get birth certificates in other states where judges can decide.
They're all thriving, and I'm just here. That's why I kind of feel like a ghost.
So Denver 7 Investigates reached out to CDPHE. In a statement, a spokeswoman says the rules are largely designed to prevent fraud, adding privacy laws do not allow us to discuss an individual application for a delayed birth certificate. But Abigail's not alone. In the past 6 years, CDPHE has denied 84 of 347 delayed birth certificates, almost a quarter of the applications.
I have 5 other clients that are waiting on the outcome of this litigation to hopefully be able to get their birth certificates too.
What needs to change?
I can't say what the law should be, but I can say that the current law is unconstitutional and clearly unfair.
Abigail, now pregnant with her second child, says she'll keep fighting for her family and other unregistered Americans so they don't have to remain ghosts.
I hope they find a little bit of compassion for those whose circumstances were out of their control when they were younger.
Colorado Legal Services and Abigail sued CDPHE in district court and lost, but they are appealing now to the Colorado Court of Appeals, and they're waiting for a date to be set. So Natalie and Jessica, she says the first thing she would do with a birth certificate is get a driver's license and get legally married.
Just the simple things that every adult kind of goes through. It must be so frustrating, Jacqueline.
It's crazy, and it has been so frustrating for her for all of these years.
Yeah, and to hear that this has happened to her siblings, but they were able to get these birth certificates in other states, just really shining a light on what's going on here in Colorado. And we know that you will continue to hold CDPHE accountable here.
Yeah, other states make it a lot easier. Thanks so much, guys. And this has happened to a lot of people. So if this has happened to you, I would love to hear from you. Just scan this QR code on your screen for ways to connect with me, or you can send me an email at jacqueline.allen@denver7.com. For Denver 7 Investigates, I'm Jacqueline Allen.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And looking closer here, as you just heard, Abigail's birth was overseen by a midwife, not by a hospital or a doctor. You may be wondering what happens when you give birth at a hospital in Colorado. Well, we checked, and most hospitals in our state have birth registrars who work with newborn parents to complete all necessary documents before families are discharged. Both Denver Health and St. Joe's tells us that they help parents fill out, sign, and date the state of Colorado's birth certificate worksheet. The hospital then submits those records on behalf of parents to the Colorado Department of Health the day after families are discharged. You can expect your baby's birth certificate within 2 to 4 weeks, either mailed to you or available for pickup at the hospital.
Thank you. I do have an update on that story because we've been following it ever since, and I've been pushing CDPHE for some answers, and they are telling me that they are looking at a rulemaking procedure in February, and the ball is moving, the wheels are turning slowly, but they are turning to try to change that rule, so I'm thrilled about that, and I've also done an open records request to find out why they are denying some of these other birth certificates to find out what the situation is. So thank you so much to Colorado Legal Legal Services for helping me find that story and tell it. I think that's an indication of the important work that you're doing. I feel like we have a lot in common as a consumer investigative reporter and as a journalist, because I'm looking to help people find solutions to elevate the voices of people who don't get heard, and also to hold the powerful accountable. And I know that some of the work that you are doing falls right in line with that. So it's an honor to be asked to do this here today and to get to be part of this fireside chat. Thank you very much for having me. So I would love to introduce our fireside chat panelist. Matt Baca is the Executive Director of Colorado Legal Services. That's Colorado's statewide legal aid provider, serving all 64 of Colorado's counties out of 12 offices and with 180 staff members. Before taking on this leadership role in 2023, Matt served as the director of the Community Engagement Division in the Office of the Colorado Attorney General, Phil Weiser. Earlier in his career, Matt worked in Colorado Legal Services' Migrant Farm Worker Division, where he litigated a full docket of employment, civil rights, and human trafficking cases. John Asher is the Executive Director Emeritus of Colorado Legal Services. He served as the organization's top leader for 23 years until his retirement in 2023. John was formerly the Executive Director of the Legal Aid Society of Metropolitan Denver from 1980 until 1999, when the three then federally funded legal services organizations consolidated and became a single statewide program, Colorado Legal Services. John began his legal services career as a staff attorney with Colorado Rural Legal Services in Greeley, Colorado in 1971.
I'll come over here and join you. So we're going to just have an informal chat to talk a little bit about Colorado Legal Services. And as we just saw from the story that I had the honor of reporting, your work really touches people's lives. There is a human impact to it. So we'll start with you, Matt. When you think about who Colorado Legal Services works with today, who comes to mind, and what stories really show the heart of the work that you're doing?
Thanks so much for the question, and thank you for being here, and thank you to everybody for being here. It's a big occasion for Colorado Legal Services and for the work that we do together. When I think about the clients we represent, I really think and know, and I think everybody here who's on staff or who volunteers with us knows that they're often the most vulnerable people in our communities across Colorado, whether it's in a metropolitan area or whether it's somebody in a rural community. We know it's somebody who may be going through the most difficult legal moment of their life. But I want to acknowledge and recognize the difficulty that many folks are facing, but also note and celebrate really the courage of our clients as well, and the autonomy and agency that our clients have. I think you saw that in Abigail Colon's story, that here's somebody who is fighting for justice and has been on her own for many years. And we get to walk alongside her for a period of time and help her with her legal case. We see that in many other cases as well. So our clients who are survivors of human trafficking, for example, that's one of the areas of law that I practiced before with Jennifer Rodriguez and Jocelyn Jenks, and victims of labor trafficking might have to escape from their trafficking circumstance in the middle of the night, right, and go seek justice. And so again, celebrating their courage, their agency, the work that the clients do for themselves to better their circumstances. I think about that also for seniors that we represent. For example, we represented 3 seniors in a senior living apartment in Greeley, Colorado, who had been trying to get their landlord to fix their elevator because some of their neighbors and some of them couldn't leave the building because they live on the 2nd or 3rd floor of the building, and with a broken elevator, they couldn't use the stairs. And so again, courageously working for justice, and then we as an organization get to support them and seek a good outcome.
Love that. John, after so many years of working with Colorado Legal Services, when you think about the people that you've helped and the things that you've done, what are you most proud of?
most of the work we do doesn't wind up on Channel 7. It's wonderful when it does, but most of the work we do is pretty invisible. I think it's vitally important to the million people we've represented in 100 years. And though unknown, I think that makes a huge impact. But two things I'm really proud of. One is when I started in 1971, domestic violence was not a known phenomenon. Not that it didn't exist, but nobody made it visible. Nobody challenged it. Nobody said women have the right to live safely and without abusive partners. There were very little things about consumer rights or the rights of people who were trying to borrow money or buy a car. There was virtually no law about due process or retaliatory evictions, as well as other areas of the law. When before legal services, a landlord could evict somebody for no reason, but could also evict somebody for going to the public housing or to the housing authority and saying their conditions violated the housing codes. Legal services challenged those lack of rights, and the whole fabric of due process and equal protection, consumer rights, victims' rights really flowed from the quality of the lawyers and staff who were committed to working for low-income people, not just in Colorado, but around the country. Let me just share one thing that has always made me proud. It's now a number of years ago, but the then governor of Colorado was one of the first people to talk about rationing healthcare. He essentially said that old people have a duty to die. And he said, we spend an exorbitant, unnecessary amount of funding in people's last 30 days of life on futile but heroic measures to save them. I was on a panel with Governor Lamb, and I told him that if he told me when his 30 days started to run, we would stop his medical. I was never asked to be on another panel with him. But I got a call after he was after he talked about rationing healthcare. And I got a call from the director of the Youngstown, Ohio program. And he said he had been home that morning, saw on the Today Show or one of the morning shows that the governor had been on talking about the need to ration healthcare. And he said, but of course, I have to do it fairly and according to rule and regulation, because if I don't, Denver Legal Aid will sue me. Now, the fact that the chief executive officer of Colorado thought that there were limits on his authority and that somehow somebody might know about legal aid, navigate our intake system, get to a lawyer, and he would be held accountable, not above the law, but be held accountable to follow the law is about the greatest compliment I think a legal aid lawyer can get.
I mean, it's incredible to think about, from everything from domestic violence defense and helping domestic violence victims to human trafficking to holding the governor accountable, the work that you have done, and the idea that having access to justice provides access to opportunities. So we're celebrating 100 years here. That doesn't seem like as long a time as it would have to me like 20 years ago, but it is a long time. So we want to look at some of the historical context of this. If you look back at the early days, John, when CLS was first founded, how has that evolved and changed over a century?
The Legal Aid Society was started in 1925 by the Denver Bar Association. It had 2 lawyers, I think, and it did some divorces, it did some eviction defense. Some of the legal aid programs wouldn't do bankruptcies because they thought discharging lawful debts was immoral. I see bankruptcy Judge Bruce Campbell here. So they were very traditional. Over the years, the programs grew. They got funding from states, federal governments, not just from the local bar and what was then United Way. And so we have grown, we've become much more sophisticated. We started to use people who didn't have a law license. The early paralegal movement started in legal aid. We gave brief service. If we didn't know, we were unbundled and doing discrete task service, but we certainly did. So we were a leader in the evolution of the practice of law and also used technology. I used to say I walk by the dumpsters every month behind the big law firms because what they threw out was an upgrade for us. But given the TIG funding and the evolution, we are much more sophisticated and able to do high quality legal services. But one thing hasn't changed, and that is your connection to client needs and using very high skilled staff and holding them accountable for providing high quality legal services has remained constant. Good intentions aren't enough. Good lawyers and staff are what low income clients need.
Are there any milestones over all these years that you've worked there, or Matt, if you have any thoughts on this as well, some moments that really shaped Colorado Legal Services and stand out to you as what it means in the community?
Well, I think I could speak to recent history, and one effort that I would note, which John Levy mentioned before, was the creation of the Colorado Equal Justice Authority. And that was really relatively recent. That was in the legislative session in 2024. And we and a group of partners went to the legislature. We presented, I think, very compelling data, and that was led by the Colorado Access to Justice Commission and Elisa Overall, and showed that Colorado is very far, and they still are, but less so now, are peer Western states when it comes to funding legal aid. So, for example, Wyoming was spending 3.5 times as much on legal aid per capita as Colorado. New Mexico and Nevada were spending, I think Nevada was 6 times as much per capita. New Mexico is about 3 times as much. And I really do think that was a key moment. Now, that's early in my tenure here as executive director. And so hopefully, there will be other important moments ahead. And I know there have been many in the past, but it was really compelling the way that the community worked together, the legal aid community in Colorado, to push for the creation of the Equal Justice Authority.
Did you want to speak to that, John?
Well, I can go back a little farther than 2024. Not that that's insignificant, but it is a model of simply responding to the current crisis. And I look back at the minute I started as director of Denver Legal Aid in late 1980. Legal services had withstood challenges in the late 60s, early 70s. I think navigating challenges in the early 80s, in the mid 90s. The question, I think, has always been, how do we, on behalf of clients, continue to deliver high quality service despite the periodic challenges? And I think probably that is, I think another milestone is, I think if you want to look at an example of the peaceful and successful transition of power, Matt and I represent that.
Wonderful. I think it's interesting to hear that throughout this century, the mission has stayed the same. It's still profound. The idea that justice doesn't depend on where you live or how much money you make, which I think is wonderful. And you have spoken a little bit about the challenges as we are looking ahead. We have already heard a little bit about that earlier. But John, would you like to talk to me about what sort of challenges you see facing us coming in the future?
Well, of course, resources is a constant challenge. And the fact that for everybody we help, and we help them well here in Colorado, it's the number of people we turn away because we lack I still say we, maybe it's you now, but it'll always be we. It's the number of people we turn away. But I think the greatest challenge, despite what LSC has done to increase its communications, increase its media presence, despite what Matt has really transformed in terms of media and communications at CLS, not my strength. He's done, I mean, I left him a good program. I didn't leave him a perfect program. So I think he's done a lot. The greatest challenge is still the invisibility of legal services to the vast majority of the public. I think most people's view of lawyers is on cop shows, right? Everybody gets Mirandized. I didn't know that was a verb, but people are made aware of their right to counsel, and if you can't afford one, one will be appointed. People don't distinguish that from civil issues. If you're a victim of domestic violence, if you need access to health care, if you can't have a medical debt you can't pay for, if you have consumer issues or face eviction, nobody says you have the right to a lawyer, and if you can't afford one, one will be appointed for you. And that disparity between the right to counsel in criminal cases and our lack of a right to counsel in civil cases, the lack of public awareness of that disparity, I think, continues to be our greatest challenge.
Well said. So, Matt, we're talking about challenges in the future. Everyone is talking about federal funding cuts, eliminating federal funding. How does that affect CLS, not just the organization, but the Coloradans who rely on these services?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's front of mind across the organization. And, you know, funding challenges, threats to funding are as old as legal aid. This is not a new phenomenon. And I would suggest there is a silver lining to that, which is that I think we are extremely resourceful. I think we are capable of operating on a shoestring, at least as much as possible. We certainly do. And I think that the folks who come and work with us at Colorado Legal Services, our staff, are incredibly dedicated, because this uncertainty has always been with us. And I think folks know that is true. And yet we see the extraordinary dedication. But we can't help being worried about the future, worried about the federal funding picture. Of course, we are doing everything we can to shore up finances, to find new grants, to secure state funding, to find other federal funding that will be secure. But at the same time, thinking about what it ultimately means if we lose federal funding or any funding, it is an effect on our staff and it's an effect on our clients. We often talk about the return on investment, and we ran the numbers for our 2022 social return on investment. It's a 619% return on investment. So every dollar invested in Colorado Legal Services benefits the community $6.19. Well, disinvestment has that same equation, but in reverse. Every dollar taken away from Colorado Legal Services hurts the community to the tune of $6.19. And so we know the impact would be felt in apartment buildings here in Denver, in Aurora, in mobile homes, in rural Colorado, in houses all across the state. And so that's why we've worked so hard to secure our funding, and we're so grateful for the partnership with LSC, with the Legal Aid Foundation of Colorado, with COLTAF, the Colorado Bar Association, and the Colorado Access to Justice Commission. These organizations that are putting so much energy into making sure that we can provide as much legal services as we can.
600% sounds like a pretty good investment. All right, let's talk about the future and the road ahead. We've kind of had this roadmap where we've looked at the past, we've looked at the challenges. What about some things in the future? Matt, let's talk a little bit first about some innovation and trends that you're excited about when you think about the future of legal aid.
Yeah, happy to do that. I love to think about the future and where we are. And one thing I'll say, echoing what others have said, is that when I became the executive director in 2023, Colorado Legal Services was in wonderful shape with a great foundation, thanks to John, thanks to Molly Ryan, thanks to so many folks who have worked so hard in this organization for so many years. To the point where, actually, I'll tell one quick story. John Levy mentioned LSC's 50th anniversary last year, and there was a celebration in DC, and the MC of the event, a judge from Texas, quoted Benjamin Franklin, Nelson Mandela, and John Asher. So certainly a great place to build from. And a few things that that make me really excited about the future here. The week before last, we filed a petition for cert in the Colorado Supreme Court and 2 opening briefs in the Colorado Court of Appeals. I think as an organization, the energy around being strategic, around tracking case trends and working together to have the most impact possible in individual cases, which is our DNA, of course. It is direct services to individual clients, but being as strategic as we possibly can be, that I think is really exciting. On the and that's led by Joel Miner, our Deputy Director for Advocacy. And then on the operations side, we're doing really exciting and wonderful things as well. That's led by Molly Ryan, our Deputy Director for Operations, and her team, including Molly French, who's our Director of IT and Innovation, Melinda Taylor, who is our Grants Director, and Karen Vilner, who is our Director of People and Culture. Together, we see innovation in technology, some of which we've already talked about, including Texting for Outcomes, including the collaboration with the Access to Justice Commission on the website. We see the development of our coaching and growth-based performance system, which I'm really proud of, and as well as securing new grants, lots of new grants. So there are lots of things that's internally. And then externally, what I think I would say is it's really an incredible time in the legal aid community in Colorado, not just at Colorado Legal Services. When I think of the partners who have worked on the legislation that we mentioned, when we think about folks who are pursuing other means of legal advocacy that we don't do, there's a huge amount of energy and enthusiasm in the community. Now I see Jenny Wary, the Executive Director of Alpine Legal Services. They do incredible work in Glenwood Springs, and just recognizing that there always will be challenges. There always will be. It is it's the nature of legal aid that, as John said, is often invisible, and yet there also will be the energy to meet those challenges.
John, what gives you hope when you're looking?
Well, let me back up. The first Weld County Bar Association meeting I attended was in the early fall of 1971, and the Bar Association voted Colorado Rural Legal Services out of town. They had no authority to do it. It was just a sign of affection, and they thought we were socialized law, just like, so they weren't wrong about it. No, several years later, I was still in Greeley. There was pressure on the then governor to stop state funding. There was a little bit. And the Weld County Bar unanimously voted to write to the governor to maintain funding for Colorado Rural Legal Services. I think we demonstrated that you can represent poor people with the tie on, that you can represent poor people professionally and responsibly, and that you will get the support you need to defend providing high quality service to low income people. This room reflects the future of civil legal services, from the LSC board and staff to federal court judges, former Congress people, current staff, current board members, former supporters, current funders, partners in the legal aid community. It is this group that had kept me going for over 50 years More importantly, it is this group that will maintain civil legal services well into the future.
Well, I think that we are about ready to wrap up. And I just think that the idea that we take away from this is that justice belongs to everyone. You've had such an incredible legacy. It's been an honor to get to meet you. And I thank you so much for letting me have this privilege of being here in this room with all of the people who are doing the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it. It's been a treat to get to know you, John and Matt. I can't wait to continue to cover stories about Colorado's most vulnerable. And anyone who might have any story ideas, I would love to hear from you. My email address was on the story, so just find me from Denver 7. And thank you so much. Is there anything that you wanted to say to wrap up that I didn't ask you? I like to give my interviewees a chance to do a final say and have the last word. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Jacqueline, and thanks again to everybody for being here. It's a moment to celebrate. It's a moment to reflect, and I hope that we can gather enthusiasm and energy in this room and in the celebration, and know that, as John said, these are the folks in the room who are advancing justice across Colorado, and I couldn't have a greater honor of being part of this organization and this work.
Well said.
All right. Thank you so much again. And it was good to see so many familiar faces in here. Again, reach out to me with story ideas.
Okay, I have the privilege of introducing a video from a client of ours whose name is Nicole Ponzer. And I want to tell you a little bit about her, and then you will get to hear from her in her own words. Before I do that, I want to just again note one of the things I said toward the beginning, which is that today is, of course, a moment to reflect. And it's not just a moment to reflect on the needs of our clients. That is very important for us to do. But I also suggest that we should reflect on their agency, their dignity, and their own efforts to seek justice for themselves and for their children very often. You'll see that in this video. And so now it's my great honor to introduce the video recording of remarks by Nicole Ponzer, a former CLS client and now an esteemed member of the Colorado Legal Services Board. Nicole was a client of our excellent Grand Junction managing attorney, Daniela Shively, who I think is here. Nicole's ex-husband and father of her 5 children was extremely abusive. And in 2017, when he was criminally charged for domestic violence, she sought CLS's help. The judge granted the permanent protection order, and after 2 years of litigation, made Nicole the exclusive parent. Daniela, her attorney, said, "Nicole holds a special place in my heart. I learned so much from her and admire her strength." After recording the video, which you'll see in a moment, Nicole got back in touch and said she wanted to add something. So I've got another quote to add to what you'll see here in a moment. She said, "A huge thank you to all of the CLS staff, especially Daniela Shively, for your dedication, time, and commitment, which has made a profound and life-changing difference for my children and me. Keep up the great work, CLS. You're changing lives for the better every day." Now you'll get to hear from Nicole directly. Thank you.
When I first started out with my divorce and custody battle, I was in a small area. I was up in Summit County, and in the beginning, it was really scary, not knowing, who I could go to for help, and knowing that, I didn't really have the help I needed. And, it was, for my kids, they just didn't feel like they were being listened to. And at the same time, they couldn't understand it. They didn't understand, why are you sending us to go be with him when, it's not what we want, how he is. Why aren't you protecting us? And so for the longest time, it was, doing what the courts told me to do and not knowing, what other legs I had to stand on, because I didn't have the support from CLS. So, once I came to CLS, it was like, well, we could do this for the kids, to help them feel more safe. And that was, very impactful for my kids to know, like, you're finally being heard and somebody hears us and somebody's, helping us to walk through this. So that part was very life-changing for us to know, like, somebody can hear us and somebody is willing to help.
I want to thank our prior panel, Jacqueline, Matt, and John. Let's give them another great round of applause. And John, I want to, on this occasion, apologize on behalf of LSC that you only got third billing at our 50th anniversary after Ben Franklin and Nelson Mandela. We'll try to do better on our 100th. In this country, too many people face life-impacting problems, be it evictions, custody disputes, consumer scams, with no lawyer to help them. To give an example from here in Colorado, 75% of parties in family law cases last year did not have an attorney. If you're keeping score at home, that's over 33,000 unrepresented parties just here in Colorado in just one category of cases. And as all of you know, you've got a much better chance of prevailing if you have a lawyer than without. And again, we have the data here in Colorado. You have a 6.5 times more likely to win percentage if you have a lawyer than not for cases that go to trial. And of course, we have the urban-rural divide in Colorado and across the country. This disparity is felt even more acutely in rural communities because there is a disjunction between the locations of where lawyers are and where people who need help are. And of course, those of you from Colorado, which is most of the room, are aware that's quite evident here in Colorado, where 90% of Colorado's attorneys live in the Front Range urban corridor, and over 3/4 of the state's land area is considered rural or frontier. And more than half of Colorado's counties have less than 10 attorneys. And typically in those counties, among those 10 are the county judge and the prosecutor and a few other officials. So it's really very few people available to represent everybody else. And Colorado is not unique in this. The bottom line is there's not enough traditional legal help to go around throughout the country. And amidst these striking statistics, Legal Services Corporation has launched a task force to examine the unique challenges that Americans residing in rural and remote places face in finding assistance to resolve their civil legal problems. We are going to be, in the next 10 days, publishing the task force's final report, and you'll be able to find that on our website at lsc.gov. And the report will discuss both major barriers that folks in rural areas face, as well as many innovative models for meeting and overcoming those challenges. Likewise, here in Colorado, the Colorado Access to Justice Commission has also been prioritizing the issue of rural legal deserts. And that's why we are here with this panel today, to explore how Colorado's rural leaders are responding through innovation, collaboration, and a deep understanding of local needs and strengths. We want to highlight what is working so others can learn from you and adapt to shape their own local solutions. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our panel, Araceli Gutierrez, who is a licensed legal paraprofessional at CLS's Grand Junction office, Chad Kaiser, the managing attorney of the CLS Alamosa office, and Emo Overall, the executive director of the Colorado Access to Justice Commission. Welcome and thank you for being with us. Let me sit down and start our conversation. Chad, let's start with you. You manage a team serving low-income residents in the San Luis Valley, one of the most remote areas in Colorado for those of us from outside of Colorado. Can you tell us what you see on the ground when it comes to access to justice and how the rural nature of your workplace and home affect that?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much, and I'm definitely honored to be part of this panel. And I just want to say, I think there's many of my colleagues, many of you in this room, who I wish we had like many more comfy chairs to just set up, and we could all discuss our strategies and what we're seeing together. But for me, obviously, there's a lot of unique challenges that come with practicing legal aid in a rural area like the San Luis Valley. For those of you who aren't familiar, the San Luis Valley is composed of 6 counties, and it's a land area about the size of New Jersey, actually a little bit bigger than the state of New Jersey. Our office in the San Luis Valley, or it's in the town of Alamosa, Colorado, is composed of myself, another attorney, a paralegal, and an intake specialist. And so there's 4 of us who are covering an area larger than New Jersey. So obviously you can imagine some of the challenges that would come with that. The San Luis Valley is also not just a big area, but it's under-resourced. And I could throw at you statistic after statistic after statistic to explain how the San Luis Valley is one of the poorer areas in Colorado, and I'll spare you that. I'm happy to talk more about my home because I really do love it. And you can follow up with me at the reception, I suppose. But with all of these challenges, yeah, I mean, there's unique aspects to being a rural legal aid attorney, and we're just trying to deal with the issue that John mentioned earlier of invisibility. Like, we don't want to be invisible. We want to be visible in the community, but how do we do that when it's such a rural, spread out, and under-resourced area that we're practicing in?
Araceli, what do you see in Grand Junction?
Well, in Grand Junction, I mean, it is a city, but we do cover 3 other counties where they are more rural. So I see many challenges, you know, from traveling distance, lack of local attorneys, and also in the more rural areas, just internet is scarce sometimes, and even phone connectivity, just trying to reach to us can be difficult. So.
Emo, you have a statewide perspective on this. How do you view these issues from that perspective?
Thanks, Ron, and thank you for having me and sitting here. I too wish there were so many more comfy chairs, and I feel very honored to get to sit in one of them. Our Colorado Access to Justice Commission is a statewide commission that tries to look at access to justice solutions in a systemic way. And we see some of the rural issues, and as you mentioned before, rural legal deserts is one of our main priorities. We see some of the rural issues as having efforts be so siloed off from each other. You know, folks are doing really similar things and coming up with against the same barriers in many communities, and the solutions aren't always going to be the same. But to have them know about one another and be able to support one another's efforts is a real challenge.
I think we all have a sense of the challenges of providing legal services in rural areas. And one of the things we're doing in our Rural Justice Task Force report, and hopefully today, is talk about some of the solutions and the innovations to address them. A trend that's gaining momentum, not just here in Colorado, but across the country, is looking, in addition to lawyers, to authorize alternative types of legal helpers known, and we're going to have to come up with a better descriptor than this, as allied legal professionals. It sounds like, I don't know what, but we'll need to come up with a better, but this includes community justice workers, tribal lay advocates, certified paralegals, and licensed legal paraprofessionals who can provide limited services in specific practice areas. And Colorado is among the newest states to authorize a legal pathway for licensed legal paraprofessionals. And Araceli, I understand you played a leadership role in developing and designing how CLS would integrate the position in client matters and casework. Can you tell us how the licensed legal paraprofessional program is working in practice, what kinds of cases you handle, and how clients in rural areas are responding to having you available to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will start by saying that the purpose of the LLPs as a whole was really to expand access to affordable legal representation or legal assistance. And so from the moment, and I still remember Becca Failer, I know she's here, talked to us about these LLPs. I was like, this would be wonderful for CLS. And from that moment, I just kind of couldn't get it out of my head how we're kind of, CLS is really just set up perfectly to bring on an LLP. And so for
Let
me,
me interrupt.
yeah.
Why were you set up so well to bring on an LLP?
Well, because as I mentioned, the purpose was really to expand legal services at an affordable rate, and at CLS for us to be able to give these services for free, and we're also set up with attorneys, so it's an easier transition. Say if we need to pull in an attorney, it works a lot smoothly. So I was really excited, and I feel super honored to be here as well. To be
I
able
interrupted
to take
you,
this
so
on.
yeah, keep
Yeah,
going.
so the cases I handle, up to this point, it's all, with the licensure, domestic relations, family law cases. So as of now, I'm handling the non-complex, non-contested hearings, whether it be divorce, custody, assistance with protection orders, and that's a range of services. And so a part of those services could be just from the beginning, just what pleadings do I file? What do I need to get a case started, to walking them through the entire case, going to the non-contested hearings at this point. So, and our clients have been nothing but extremely grateful, and have really shown a lot of trust in my role, which is really exciting because I was a little nervous at first. I thought they'd be a little doubtful, but no, they've been nothing but grateful to receive some sort of assistance.
Chad, as an attorney at CLS, what's your take on this program, and how do you view the trained paraprofessionals as a complement to your cadre of attorneys and other staff?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, I can't wait for more of this, right? And I'm really glad that Araceli is here and that she gets to highlight her work and that's being done in the Grand Junction office. And I absolutely view it as a compliment. I think it's just going to complement a lot of things within the legal profession as a whole. One of the issues in rural areas that was mentioned earlier is a lack of local attorneys, right? It's not just that our office is small or feels small in Alamosa, but also the bar is small. That there's this issue with attorneys, people who graduate college, go on to law school, incur a bunch of debt, and then end up practicing in an area like the Denver metro area where they feel like they can make enough money to pay off their student loans or whatever the motivation is. I view this licensed legal paraprofessional program as a way to encourage community members, people who grew up in the place like the San Luis Valley, to be able to stay in a place like the San Luis Valley and yet pursue a professional advocacy role that's really going to benefit a lot of people in the place where we live.
And we're going to come back to that in a minute or two, because from what you're describing, the trust that is necessary in any attorney or service provider client relationship is so critical. And it seems to me, if you're part of the community and you're really helping a neighbor, that need to build trust maybe is addressed more easily. Emo, the Commission's Rural Legal Resources Project strategic plan for 2025 and 2026 envisions equipping community members and organizations with legal first aid training to identify legal issues and connect people with help, and also outlines priorities including expanding law student exposure to rural practice and building a central organizing hub for pro bono opportunities statewide, so attorneys that live in urban centers can volunteer to help people in the rest of the state, and partnering with rural libraries. So really 2 questions as you think about your plans so far as they've rolled out. What have been some of your successes already, and what are some of the more challenging issues that you see coming up, and what's the game plan for addressing those?
Thanks, Ron. Some of the successes that we have already seen include being able to really develop relationships on the ground in Southeast Colorado, which is where we set up to really focus. We're a staff of 5. Brett Landis is over here. She's our director of pro bono. And so with a little limited staff, how are we going to tackle rural legal deserts in all of Colorado? So we decided to really focus on Southeast Colorado. And our director of rural legal services has gone there dozens of times in the 1 year that we've had of funding to pursue this. And he has met with anyone under the sun, religious leaders, school counselors, city council people, judges who told him he doesn't know what he's talking about, just everyone local who points, and he always asks, who else do I need to talk with? So that he's not making all of the assumptions, and he's not really driving even the process of mapping out where the community assets are. And with that humility and with the intention of co-creating solutions with the communities, that's where he has really developed these trusting relationships, where he's created a local leadership steering committee, and they have started to slate out what a legal first aid program should look like in their community, and that has been incredibly successful. That exercise of genuinely, truly listening with curiosity and not presupposing that you have the answer, and also not trying to parachute in yourself or your ideas.
So what are some of the, what do you envision the challenges you're going to try to meet in 2026, and how will you go about trying to surmount those?
I think the next step of the program, so where we're at is still in the ideating phase. We still have to create a curriculum and stand up the program. I think the challenge is especially going to come with how to gauge consumer protection. So our ultimate goal is to convince our Supreme Court that they should issue a waiver of the unauthorized practice of law for other professionals who are trained in specific areas, true justice partners, if you will, that are under some supervision criteria. And that's not going to be easy. We have to show them that this is working, that training people who aren't lawyers isn't doing harm, that people with repetition can gain a high level of competency, oftentimes higher than attorneys, and to document that in a real transparent and trustworthy way so that we can try and move that policy needle with our Supreme Court.
How do you, I know in our advocacy in Congress and elsewhere, we're always looking for data to try to convince our funders that the work that you all do is impactful in your communities. What sort of data are you trying to gather to help you in your advocacy?
Well, we're looking to folks like yourself and Nicole Nelson and others who have successfully worked on these programs around the nation. And we've learned that some of the data that can be really powerful, in addition to the number of people trained and the anecdotal stories, is also having a third-party independent audit of the quality of legal advice legal advice being given with the legal first aid program, it won't be legal advice, but the quality of legal information being given. And then also a net promoter score, which is how likely are you to recommend this to a peer, is also a very powerful indicator of satisfaction rather than, did you resolve your legal issue? That's not a great indicator of how high the quality is of the legal help or legal information, but rather that trust enough that they would vouch for you and vouch for the program with a friend or a neighbor.
Araceli and Chad, what are your observations with regard to some of the programs that Emo has just described?
Honestly, I think it's just wonderful. I think if anything, it's just a model, maybe just a good place to start. And hopefully in all of Colorado, maybe this will be, an expansion, because I think this is great. People need good, reliable legal information, because a lot of times even community partners aren't relying good information sometimes, or accurate information, I should say. So I think it's wonderful.
Chad?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to fill a gap of what we're seeing in rural areas, which is there are this sort of front line of people who work. They might work for a nonprofit, or maybe they're just a neighbor who cares about their neighbors and are seeking to help others. And to, that's something that we try and do, not recruiting them at this point to provide advice, right? But partnering with people that are on the front line like this to help us reach people. I think empowering them with this, legal first aid kit sounds very promising.
Now, all three of you talked about the necessity of partnerships to realize your goals, both the Commission's goals in its rural legal resources strategic plans and your goals in serving your clients in your communities. And as I mentioned before, at the heart of any strong partnership is trust. And our task force report devotes an entire section to the idea of expanding access to justice in rural America depends on building trust, really listening as you've described and responding to what matters most to local residents, and not, as one of you said, parachuting in with all of the answers before you know even what the questions are. And co-creating solutions that capitalize on local strengths, maybe the existence of a library that's a community center or something like that. I'd like to ask each of you to speak to how we make trust real in rural Colorado. Emo, what are your thoughts?
How to make trust real. I might sound repetitive, but there is really an element of humility that has to go into that. Now, us lawyers are not known per se for that specific quality.
What are you talking about?
But really, truly, honoring the lived experience of the people who are at the center of the justice gap, right? They are the experts in the justice crisis. So often, it just happens where the commission of incredible commissioners that I'm the director of will have someone who's really passionate about something and say, hey, what about if we just really need to charge down this unbundled services route? And it's so important that we just try and resist centering that person who is already in power and their passions and bringing it back to the experts, the people on the ground. And when that is the North Star, I think the litmus test in these partners really is met, and they see that you're there to do business. And I think that's a high value currency in partner building.
Chad, in the San Luis Valley, CLS partners with a number of organizations and people. Can you talk about those partnerships and how they promote the creation and expansion of trust?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your question of how do you build trust? one of the things that it takes is a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and a lot of consistency. And I mentioned earlier that we're an office of 4 people. I keep saying that. We're limited in our time and what we can afford to spend in a lot of these outlying communities that take over an hour to drive to from our office location. So to your question, we want to try and use people who are already trusted in the community. We want to partner with people who are already present and trusted in their community, who have maybe grown up there, who have maybe been working there for decades, trying to help their neighbors, trying to look for resources for the people that they are coming in contact with on a daily basis. Examples of that is we have a great organization in the San Luis Valley called La Puente. They're one of the first rural homeless shelters in the nation, and they have a lot of services, and we partner with them by trying to by establishing a relationship with them, right, and educating their staff on what issues, are legal issues, what are things that we can talk to their clients about, what are things that we can what are situations that we can step into and really help the people that they're working with, because they are out in the community. They have a staff of 60 plus people who are out delivering firewood to people who don't have a heat source, who are out delivering food to people who don't have the means to get groceries for the week. These are really valuable community members that we can partner with and have done and will continue to do to try and reach these Coloradoans that are living in these remote places and often are having dealing with issues that they don't even realize they can talk to a lawyer about. But we're here, and that's what we're here for.
Araceli, this is something relatively new for you, and how have you gone about building trust? What's been important in your ability to build trust with the people you're trying to work with and help?
Although this is a new position for me, I have been with CLS for 7 years. So, being a paralegal and, being super close to the attorneys, I echo Chad. We have a lot of community partners, from domestic violence shelters to staying in touch with our district attorney's office, our advocates, and, any other professional they might need, just to make it a smooth transition for that client, so they're not just kind of hanging on their own when it's not a legal necessity they might need it, when it's something else. So I think that's one of the big things. One big thing for me personally is I am a native Spanish speaker. So I think that's one of the things where I can connect and really build trust. And even in general, bringing clients in person, come see me, come see our office, come see our attorneys, and come see our paralegal who can help you out if I'm not here. So just really that face-to-face, and our attorneys do a wonderful job at doing community events. We do also hold a virtual senior law series who started off very small in Mesa County, and now it's a big thing in Colorado. So it's really good, but it's built trust.
Thank you. Emo, building trust is key, not just in the relationships between service providers and the people they're trying to help, but in almost everything we do. And given your position with the commission, you're not only looking at these service provider client issues, but also trying to get funding and work with policymakers. How do you build trust with them?
Building trust with policymakers also takes a lot of time. And it means coming to policymakers before you have the ask, before you actually have your hair on fire and need something from them.
I will say hair on fire is a very scary concept to me, but keep going.
And so trying to get to know policymakers early on, I think one of the most pivotal moments in our Commission's ability to effectuate systemic change has been that realization that we need to have a presence at the state capitol. And that was terrifying because I did not know how to do that. And so being willing to learn that and also acknowledging there are people who know how to do that can teach us. So hired a lobbyist, still have a lobbyist. And getting that guidance has been extremely helpful. But yet trying to get in front of policymakers before you have an ask and getting to know them, understanding what is it that's going to be tone deaf this year, right? In Colorado, asking for a cent, 1 cent is going to be tone deaf this year because our state doesn't have any money this year. So things like that are important with policymakers. I also will talk about the policymakers at the judicial department. You know, it's just hand in glove. They are so important. They're as important as the lawmakers themselves. And so the Supreme Court I mentioned before, they do require evidence that what you are proposing is sound, and that and also an acknowledgement that it does take a lot of time and a lot of stakeholder building for them for the judicial department, specifically the Supreme Court, to effectuate change. So really meeting them where they're at, which oftentimes is a whole different world than where advocates on the ground think they should be. So speaking their language and really trying to get into the head of somebody who has this enormous responsibility to, you know, gatekeep the profession and trying to kind of bridge that gap through some real translation and adjustments of expectations.
Thank you. We've been focused here on the challenges of meeting, of providing legal services in rural areas and both the personal challenges as well as the organizational challenges. Let's sort of look on the other side, what I hope is the other side of the coin, which is the joys of what you do and you know, how that sustains you. Chad, what are your joys in the work you do?
Yeah, so this is where I wish I had more than like the 2 minutes that I get, right?
Just talk fast.
Because I really do love the job that I have, the work that we do. I love living in the San Luis Valley. And so just one of the reasons is I feel like doing legal aid, practicing legal aid in a rural area really drives home this idea that my clients are my neighbors, right? We live in such a small community that quite literally some of my clients have just lived a couple houses up the street from me, which can be awkward sometimes, but I think it's valuable. You know, we share a common life together. We go to the same we go to the same barber. We go to the same community events. We share the same park spaces. We go grocery shopping at the same places. Like there's this sort of common common life that we have that really does away with this idea that like I'm a lawyer, they're my client, and here's this wall that goes up between us, right? And yes, it's important to have professional boundaries, but I personally really love it when I see some of my clients out in the community. I think a great example is some grandparents that I helped with their adoption case for their grandchild. And so I see this family out in the community. I'll run into them outside of the barbershop like I recently did. And every time I see them, this boy is a little bit, you know, taller. He's a little bit more talkative, and I get to hear just updates on their life. And I feel like I wouldn't get to do that if I didn't live in a place like Alamosa, or at least not as much. And that's something that I just really cherish, and it makes it so rewarding.
That's pretty good, even in 2 minutes. Emo, what are the joys for you?
The joys are many. Most profoundly for me is just the incredible people who are in this work, right? We're not in it for the money. We're not in it because it's easy, but because this is a passion and it's a calling for so many of us in this room, and to see the stone soup that is created on a regular basis by these heroes that say, all right, I've got this little thing. My cousin's friend has another thing that might help here. And just seeing people dig deep into their connections and their resources and come together with solutions that that really sort of defy budgets and defy gravity is so rewarding and enjoying to me.
Araceli, you get the last word on joy.
For me, it's the clients. I just from the beginning that they have contact with us to the end. I mean, it's just showing up as a professional, but also as a human, to know at the end of the day, it's like you are worthy of receiving quality legal services, irrespective of your financial status, irrespective of language barriers or the current situation they're in. I think it's really empowering to see that shift once their case is over, and it's just beautiful to see how empowering these clients become, and it just fulfills my heart.
Well, your comments about joy convinces me that the justice gap is not inevitable. It is actually solvable if we empower local leaders like the three we have on stage today. So please join me in thanking Chad and Araceli and Ema. And I want to thank all of our presenters and panelists for such thoughtful and inspiring conversations, and really to all of you for being here today and for the work you do every day, in many instances for many years, to help your neighbors. I especially want to thank our partners here in Colorado, the board and staff of Colorado Legal Services and the Legal Aid Foundation of Colorado, for your vision, your hospitality, and your tireless work on behalf of the people in the state. And I'm also deeply grateful to my colleagues, both on LSC's board and our staff, for your leadership and unwavering commitment to our mission, and to my colleagues at LSC for your extraordinary work in bringing this program together here today. And let's join in a round of applause for the hotel staff that have been so gracious.